I feel like diet culture sets you up to never be good enough.
Did you burn 500 calories on the treadmill today? No? Me either.
I mean, anybody can sit with us. We're just really not about diet culture.
But literally, happiness doesn't come from a low-calorie, high-intensity life. I actually do like carrots.
I do too. They're my favorite.
Welcome to the Fit Fueled Free podcast.
So basically, diets suck.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 53. I'm Danielle.
And I'm Jenna, and today we are finishing up a two-part conversation that we started last week, which if you haven't listened to part one, you're going to want to go ahead and do that. We had the privilege of hearing Danielle's story about her relationship with alcohol and her journey of just giving it up for the past year. So if you didn't tune in last week, highly recommend that because it's an incredible story hearing Danielle talk about it and share it, and it's super empowering. So go do that right now if you haven't. But today, in the second part of this conversation, Danielle and I are talking about alcohol and its relation to health, fitness, and diet culture as well.
Yes. Well, thank you for those kind words.
Of course.
So I want to talk about alcohol and diet culture first.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because I'm curious your take on this, because I feel like we've had a lot of similar experiences of just like weird things that happen to us with our like being afraid of things that are disordered, and then just no one ever said it out loud. But I feel like because drinking is so glorified in television shows or just, well, I never really get to spend much time around people that have loads of money, so I can't say from personal experience, but I feel like with wealth, there is a tendency for higher alcohol intake and a tendency for the thin ideal to be like worshipped, which is, you know, a big foundation we talk about with diet culture and just like that whole patriarchal issue. But I always felt drawn to it, like even before I started using alcohol very much at all. I was like, oh, like these girls are so thin and they don't really eat, they just sip these fancy drinks and like their life is great. So I felt drawn to that, and to not be someone who overindulged, quote unquote, in calories from my food because I wanted to make sure I could save it for alcohol. And every time I failed at that, like, which you should fail because it's really freaking dangerous to behave that way, I just was so disappointed in myself. I was like, why am I not like this? But it was made up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I 100% agree. I think it's significantly glamorized and like glorified in television shows. And even in shows that like younger girls are watching, like the shows that like we watched growing up, like none of the Disney shows, but definitely Gossip Girl. I'm trying to think of like other prime ones in my head, but I know like even in college there are shows that kind of like glamorize it, and you're sitting there like in college being like, my experience is nothing like that.
Right.
But I 100% agree. I think, I know at least for me, it was kind of like a trial and error in the sense that like when I first went to college, that was like my first experience really with alcohol in general, just because in high school, I think I've shared this, like I played soccer, you know, year round. I just didn't have time. And so for me, there wasn't as much of this glamorization of like, you know, eating less to consume, like, to like kind of counterbalance the calories. I just kind of went all in. And then was like, and then because of that, I realized like, oh, all the calories from like beer, all the calories from all the food I'm eating combined, I was like, oh, hello, freshman 20, whatever it was. And I think from that point on, then I was a little bit more aware of it, but I really don't think it was until after college, if I would, have a girls' night or like have a drink, I would purposely be like, okay, well, here's what my day of eating is going to look like, or here is like what tomorrow is going to look like in terms of food, because I had calories in like a cocktail or like a beer or whatever it was that I was drinking. And I didn't realize how harmful that was and how much of a diet culture message wrapped in a bow that was at the time, because you're kind of like, well, everyone's doing it.
Right.
But yeah, yeah.
There's actually a term, like a slang kind of term called drunkorexia.
Oh, I haven't heard that.
I read an article about it. There's this newsletter that I've been subscribed to for like 10 years called Today's Dietitian, and it just like has research articles that come out, and it definitely has a diet culture centric agenda of like with health and weight. But it talked about this article just about how especially college girls won't eat to save their calories, and that is extremely disordered. So they just labeled it drunkorexia, because I mean, when you find out that a shot has 70 calories average, that's really like alarming when you're someone that's afraid of calories. Yeah. And then you think about the fact that if there's a mixer in there or anything else, then, or if you have beer or wine, it's double that minimum. And so, well, depending on the kind, but it's just very alarming. So I kind of thought that was like funny at the time, because that was in the thick of my disordered behaviors in college when I learned about that term. And it was kind of like, haha, like this is a problem, but we're doing it. It's normal. It's college kind of thing. But it's interesting because that's a really big topic when people want to work with me and they're worried about their weight. They're like, what's the lowest possible drink calorie I can consume? And there's tons of articles about that, like dietitian approved, like,
yeah.
It's frustrating. But I totally bought into that. I brought Crystal Light with me to the bars after Spain, like after I had gained a significant amount of weight and I was binging and purging. I was like just drinking Crystal Light vodka water basically.
Oh.
And so like, see, that's so dangerous. Because it was just straight vodka that tasted like juice but had no calories, so there were no consequences in my mind about, oh, like, can't have too many of these. You can have as many as you want. So I, like, basically conditioned myself to be able to just drink, like, straight. And then I drank tequila water, like, after college. Like, I just conditioned myself to like alcohol because I had to, like, get used to it. Because I didn't want to be consuming too many calories. But over time, if you like force yourself to consume something, like your taste buds will become adjusted to it. So, but I feel like that's also a thing in a lot of shows. Like if people are drinking, it's usually like straight, like they're just drinking straight liquor, like the rich people that you see in television shows.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's not really ever, or it's rarely like a mixed drink or like a fun fruity drink.
Yeah, that's like Meredith from Grey's Anatomy, they just take the tequila bottle, all of them, to the face. Like, that's just what they do, which is, you know, I'm not condemning anyone for taking shots. You know, I hope that you're being responsible just after everything that I talked about last week in my experience. But, like, it just really, I feel like, drives home this message. Okay, she's a strong female lead character. She drinks straight liquor. You hardly ever see her eat food. She doesn't sleep. And she has this, like, you know, she's who you would want to be in that show.
Yeah.
So it's kind of confusing when that's messaging that we're being fed.
Yeah.
And it makes me think too, the other example, you said Gossip Girl, that one I feel like is like right in your face, but also Olivia Pope from Scandal. She just eats popcorn and drinks wine, and that's literally all that she lives off of.
I was literally going to say her dinner is like a glass of wine.
And she rules the world. So like that is so unfortunate, because I understand that there are functioning alcoholics, which I think that may be some of these characters, like if we were to actually like look at their lives. Yeah. But really, if you don't eat anything and all you do is drink, your brain power in theory should not be that good. So it's just like a lot of, and I know it's television, but I think it's important to call that out, because that's what we're exposed to.
Yeah. And then that's what it's like, that that's television and it's not reality, but there's some fraction of your brain that still perceives it as reality, because so many people end up doing that, expecting that result, when you can't function every night off of a glass of wine for dinner.
Right. And then there's the whole, like, I forget the like term that's used, it's kind of rude, but about moms that have those signs that are like about wine o'clock and like all of the like mom culture, or so, I don't know, someone would have to tell me what that is again, but just like how if you have stress, like you have to drink like as a mom, and then like through quarantine, it's just like all these pressures of like normalization. Like if you're gonna succeed in life, you need to have this coping mechanism that isn't always like meeting an appropriate level of alcohol a day. Like sometimes it's like way intense, like the jokes about these giant wine glasses that can fit an entire bottle of wine. Like that's really dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think I've said this before, it's like the same thought process in the sense that like your body, when you're trying to like mimic what you actually want in a healthier version, whether it's food, whatever, like I said it in the coffee episode, how I was like, I would modify the drink I actually wanted and it would never satisfy, so I would continue to get it. Same thing can happen with food. If you like give yourself an alternative or something that doesn't satisfy that like desire, you're going to continue to want it. Whereas if you just had the real thing,
yeah,
you may not always feel like you have to get more and more and more. Same with alcohol. Like my go-to drink for a while was like, I think what was it? It was like gin and water, maybe. Yeah. Because the actual gin and tonic, I was like, it's like more calories than what I want. But it's like that was never fully satisfying. So it's like you feel like you need to get more and more. Whereas if like I just got the freaking real one might be enough, And not to shame anyone who like has multiple drinks at once, but it's like, what's the intent behind it? Like I think that goes across the board, whether it's food, alcohol, like whatever it is.
Yeah. And I think that's like my approach in ever questioning anyone's alcohol consumption is I know how devastating it has been for my life. And so it's like, okay, like what is your intention? What are you doing here?
Mm-hmm. And I've definitely like stayed away from fun drinks, like a girls' weekend or whatever it is, or like at a Mexican restaurant in the past to like save calories. And it's like, just get the drink and enjoy, like, if you want the drink, like you don't have to drink to enjoy a situation, but you don't.
Yeah, I think giving up drinking and like ordering mocktails off of menus kind of put that into perspective for me of how actually like delicious sugary beverages can be. And I had convinced myself that I didn't like them. And there are certain combinations of things that I prefer over others. I'm not saying everything that's like the more sugar dense option on a menu is the tastiest, like in its personal preference. But I think I had like you said, just convinced myself of the contrary. But I've actually really enjoyed some of the drinks that I've gotten that were mocktails. Some of them have been like entirely too sweet for my preference, but then some of them were super bitter. So it's like, just exploring taste for taste's sake of enjoying a drink rather than just choosing it because it's the lowest calorie option, which sounds probably insane to a lot of people coming from a dietitian and a trainer. But like you said, it's part of your relationship with food. Like you need to have satisfaction from it. So like if you're drinking for social experience or for pleasure, not just to like get the numbing and whatever other effects you want from alcohol, then like it's the same exact concept.
Yeah.
But that's not very widely accepted.
No, it's not.
Plus margaritas are just so good.
Yeah. I actually prefer on the menu when it's like a skinny margarita, but that's because I like the agave taste.
No, me too.
Better than the actual mix because I think the mix tastes fake.
Yeah, because it is just like flavored stuff. Like a real margarita is what's up.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you, but I also don't care anymore. But I really don't think that that's like that much less calories.
Probably. I don't even know what the content is,
but either. But
it's off of preference now at this point for me. As opposed to, I'm getting skinny margarita because it's skinny, like.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. So I guess, like, overall, just questioning your intentions behind your choices. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. You froze for 1 second, but I just wanted to make sure that wasn't on your end, too. So, not to be annoying, but just to review what actually is considered to be like a serving of alcohol. And again, not for calorie purposes, but just for like FYI on how much you're consuming. So when it comes to liquor, 1.5 ounces is a serving, which is a shot. 5 ounces of wine, which is quite a little pour, especially with some of these ginormous wine glasses that exist, and then 12 ounces of beer. But that also is dependent on the alcohol percentage of these things because there used to be more of like a standard, but now, especially with IPAs, there are some beers that are like way higher alcohol content, but so technically it's more than one. It's just that those ounces are to help you gauge like a drink serving for the alcohol serving. It's not meant to do with calories. It's for that. So if you have a 12-ounce pour of an IPA that's like 12% ABV, that's going to be different than a light beer that has less alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just to, keep in mind because you may unintentionally be consuming more alcohol than you meant to.
Yeah.
Which is, I feel like most people want to be consuming as much as possible in the binge drinking, like, culture, but it's just, for awareness. And then binge drinking, which I do not know these numbers exactly, but binge drinking is considered 4 drinks for women in 2 hours and 5 for men in 2 hours. So men's recommendations are always slightly higher just because in this, like, their body sizes tend to be bigger, which I'm hesitant to even say because I would have to actually fact check if it's about body size or if it's about, like, are they digesting it differently? But I'm pretty positive, I'm like 99% sure that's it's about your weight. But I'm going to search that really quick while we're chatting.
That's interesting. I did not know that fact about how many drinks for women and men within a certain time frame.
Yeah. And then just 1 drink a day for women is considered moderate drinking and men get 2. Because of whatever that difference is, which I'm going to try and get an answer on really quick.
Wow.
So yeah, just some food for thought there about, not that you have to stick to those things, because again, we're not here to push like recommendations on you for like food rules, but just awareness, because the other thing that's really frustrating about alcohol culture is that no one seems to care about like the health like risks of drinking, which is confusing to me because we've completely demonized smoking,
Right.
which is probably for the best because we know that's not a great thing for our health, right? But like we also know the problems that alcohol can cause, and I don't believe in fear mongering, but like there does appear to be some association with increased risk of disease. And also your liver can shut down, like, and you can die. So it's like, and you can also die of intoxication of alcohol if you have too much and your blood alcohol content gets too high. So it's not even just about like when you're, 50 years from now, it's about like, okay, what happens if you mess up because you overconsume, or it's being encouraged, especially in like a fraternity sorority type situation, or any college situation can really get out of control quickly with even just drinking games. That it can be deadly. And I think everyone knows of a story of someone who died because if it's not immediate, it's a friend of a friend that died because of alcohol misuse, which is really preventable. So it's just like, and I feel like taking that, I kind of like, I sound like I'm like momming people, but taking that step away from drinking like really has brought just like a whole new lens to my, like just the things that I did that I shared last week that were just so like dangerous and frightening. And it's like, why would you subject yourself to that? I say I'm researching and I just continue talking.
That's okay.
Let's see. Do men? Because if it is about body size, that's probably actually like a trash recommendation. Okay, so this is from Harvard. It's a question specifically was, why does alcohol affect women differently? So their answer is that our bodies contain proportionately less water and more fat than men's bodies, and water dilutes alcohol and fat retains it, so our organs are exposed to higher concentrations. Women have less alcohol dehydrogenase, which is the enzyme that breaks down alcohol. So at any given dose, our BAC, which is blood alcohol content, will be higher than a man's, even when taking into account differences in body weight. So that's why 1 drink for a woman is the same for 2. So I'm glad I checked that because I had a misunderstanding of that.
For information, like informative.
Yeah, so our bodies are just functioning differently. And as we get older, we tend to metabolize less effectively. And that's really with like, as we age, things change the way we're able to break down all kinds of foods and different enzymes. So that was good to learn today. Interesting. Apparently, there's also a higher percentage of women who become alcohol dependent and suffer psychiatric consequences from it.
Compared to men?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's really interesting. So yeah, ladies, for once that is not even diet culture related. Sometimes Harvard has some pretty diet culture ridden messaging about health, so I always get nervous, but I feel they're a quite trusted resource, their medical school.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. We all learned something today. So yeah, just being aware of that and considering it, I think, is important. And I get that, like, being 28 and I'm not in college anymore, it's harder to be worried about those kinds of things when you're younger. But I think it is important to consider.
I agree.
Hmm.
Yeah, because
Oh, go ahead.
you can finish your thought.
Oh, I was going to say about eating when drinking. Did you have anything else on
No,
that?
no.
So coming back to kind of the term drunkorexia, like avoiding food for saving calories. So not only is that a problem because it's disordered mental behavior, it can be a physical problem because your body is going to get the alcohol quicker, which is why part of why people don't eat as well. Yeah. And I remember times where I wasn't hungry and I started drinking and then I just didn't have an appetite, like at all. And I couldn't feel the hunger anymore. And so that's really scary because that's just, when people say put some, carbs in your belly to soak up the alcohol, like it's good to eat when you're drinking.
Yes.
And it's smart to eat when you're drinking. So if you're afraid of eating too many calories or overall consuming because you're planning on drinking, to each their own, it's your choice, your body, but I certainly do not recommend that or encourage that kind of behavior because that's really dangerous.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And also I hear a lot of misconceptions about the calories in alcohol. So many people do not know this, but alcohol has 7 calories per gram, and carbs and protein have 4, and fat has 9. So a lot of times people blame the calories in alcohol on the carbs, and they're just trying to go for the lowest carb option. But that actually, alcohol has more calories than carbs do. So sure, if you add a lot of sugar, that is adding calories, but alcohol in and of itself takes a lot of energy to metabolize. And so that's just a fact that, again, not to scare you away from drinking, that's not my goal, but just a little bit of knowledge there about what you're actually consuming, because that concern about carbohydrates and drinking, beer is a little bit different. And certain wines are going to be sweeter, but the reason is because mainly of the alcohol itself.
Yeah.
That's why a shot has roughly 70 calories, just depending on what it is.
Mm-hmm.
What else on health should we talk about?
We can talk about the mental health aspect that you have and how to kind of incorporate it in a healthy way, if that's something people want to approach.
Yeah. I think my whole thing has been I wasn't using alcohol in a healthy way, and it was impacting my mental health really severely. And I don't know if I even talked about this last week. I don't think I did. That just for days after drinking sometimes, maybe I did say that, but it can affect you. So one of my friends told me that once, that they felt depressed for a few days after drinking. And I was like, oh my goodness, is that real? Because it made a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked it up, and it can linger because alcohol is a depressant, which is confusing because we tend to get all bubbly and loosened up. That's a common side effect that people get from drinking, which I think encourages us to drink because we loosen up, but it's actually a depressant. So when you already have depression or anxiety, it is likely that drinking will increase those symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing you think you may be doing to get a solution and get an improvement may actually be worsening your underlying issues.
Yeah.
And also in trauma therapy, which is something I'm partaking in, my therapist just straight out said that you never would have been able to do this work had you been using that coping mechanism, because part of being able to let your body bring those memories back and process it, you have to be willing to feel it. And if you're numbing the discomfort, because obviously I'm quite sure anyone here is trauma processing, like we can consider like that doesn't feel good, that you can't do that. So if you're, and I'm not like ever going to talk to someone and be like, oh yeah, you should sit through the discomfort, because I'm not a licensed therapist and I do not know when it is appropriate for someone to sit through discomfort or not. That is like you and your therapist like thing to figure out for you, because there are times where you do need to not feel things for your safety, but just something to point out, like if growing spiritually or just like mentally or whatever it is that you're working on, if you're using things that are a negative coping mechanism, they may be stunting your growth cognitively. And I am able to talk much more clearly when I'm not drinking. And I thought that was and I don't even just mean like when I'm consuming it, like in the weeks around it, if I'm drinking heavily, my thoughts aren't working correctly. And I've seen a big increase in that. Like I'm more willing to say things when I'm drinking that I wouldn't sober, but like, I mean, like my actual, like putting words together to form an intelligent sentence has improved like dramatically.
That's crazy.
I know. I used to joke a lot about how I felt like it was killing my brain cells. But like I really think I'm a completely different person when I'm not drinking on a regular basis. Because there were times where I wouldn't drink for a few months because I didn't have dependency on it. And I noticed, I was like, I feel different. But it never, like until I was ready, I never was like, okay, let me like give way more space from this.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's nuts.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on like, because I spend a lot of time with you where you decline drinking, and I know with your psoriasis that's an issue too, but like what are your thoughts as far as like gauging your mental health and drinking?
Yeah, so I mean, being someone who like freshman year of college, I shared I was on the soccer team, and that was a very social thing to do with the team and with other teams. And for the first year or so, I was really using the times we would go out and be drinking as a way for me to like feel like I was quote unquote more myself, like, and be more like likable and be more funny. And I kind of used it as a way like, oh, well, I'm like pretty quiet and reserved, like just how I am. But like, if I have a couple drinks, like I'm more fun and I'm more, you know, like loose in the sense of like I'm not as like uptight or like unapproachable. And so I really used it kind of as a way to be this other person that was, I thought people liked more, or I thought got more attention, or I thought was, you know, a more funny version of who I was without it. And I just want to say that like, if the only reason like you're using alcohol is just because you think like you're not good enough how you are without it, I would really challenge you to like step back and like figure out why you think that way. Because there's usually typically a deeper cognition with that, and kind of like challenge yourself and like realize and talk to yourself about like who you are without it, and like why you're still worthy without it. Because I think like that was kind of a huge game changer for me in the later years in college, because I was like, you know, I don't need alcohol to make me, like, I don't have to drink it to fit in. Like, if people don't like who I am without alcohol, then like, that's not someone I want in my life. Like, if people only want the version of Jenna who has a couple drinks in her because she's more fun or she's like more funny, like whatever, like that's probably not someone you want in your life. And so I think it's just kind of assessing why you're doing what you're doing, who is like kind of partaking in that and like helping, or either not helping or not helping, and then just kind of being like, okay, is this really what I want to be doing? Because I think so many people use it as a way to be a better or more fun, I'm doing air quotes over here, version of themselves, because they don't think they're good enough just how they are without it. And that's like such a like being on the other side of that, that's such a heartbreaking way to approach it. That's a heartbreaking way to think about yourself. And so I think, and that's the case, you really have to like reassess why you're doing what you're doing, and maybe like take a break from it. Like there's one summer where I didn't drink at all, because I was like, I need to become comfortable with who I am without it, because the people who are going to be in my life long term are going to be the people who love me for who I like, the person that I am, you know, on a Tuesday afternoon when I've had a really rough day and I'm just me. Like I haven't had a drink, you know, and I've never struggled, like, thankfully, with any type of like issues with alcohol. That was just never something I really ran into, but I do have people in my life who, you know, have a similar story to yours, Danielle, or, you know, one.
Hang on, you froze.
Okay.
Am
I back?
Okay, you're back. You said that you have people in your life, and then you froze.
Yeah, like I have people in my life who either have a very similar story to yours, or like at least a story that can relate. And I just think watching them try to grow from that, like the most important thing has them being to either like take a break or kind of like talk to someone, or just kind of like reassess the whole situation, and kind of separate, okay, like who am I without alcohol and who am I with alcohol, and just kind of like, why do I feel like this version of myself with alcohol is better? Because most times people realize that it's not. It's just kind of this lie, whether it's fed to them through diet culture or like a toxic relationship or friendship. Like there's usually a lie in there, because like you don't need alcohol to be the best version of yourself or to be worthy. And so I think for me, I got to that place pretty quickly because I was able to surround myself with people who believed that about me, and were like, no, we love you, and like you're fun to hang out with, like outside of a, you know, party with the team, which was super helpful for me, because I was like, oh yeah, like I am good enough, you know, just how I am. And so I think like that's just a super important process that a lot of people are gonna have to go through, and it can be hard. I mean, especially the like culture in college, it can be really hard. And I obviously have the lens of like through like being an athlete, so I don't really know any other, you know, perspective, but just I know for athletes, that's like you're going to parties, you're around that a lot, at least in the off season. And so if you can kind of figure out the route you want to take with it early on, you might be setting yourself up for a little bit more success. And not to say that like one route is failing and one route is succeeding. Like that's not what I'm saying, but there's a healthy way, I think, to approach it. And it just sometimes takes time and trial and error and vulnerability and surrounding yourself with people who are going to love you for you.
Right.
You know?
I did not know you who spent like a whole summer not drinking one time. That's really cool.
Yeah. So
something like, it's interesting that you said you felt like you were more fun, like people thought you were more fun, and that's who you were trying to like live up to. Being as like way more extroverted, there's been so many times we were drinking where like, I know even I did that to you once. I like texted you and I was like, are you okay? Because like I wasn't even drinking, but like it was like people were drinking and you were very quiet, and I was like, I associated we're drinking, Jenna's quiet, so something like must be wrong. And I've asked Matt many times, like I would get frustrated with him when we were out, like, why aren't you drinking? Like you're not having fun. Because I was like on this level, which most people usually aren't on my level when I'm drinking. I've come to recognize from not drinking. no one really behaves like that. But I always was worried of that. So I can understand now that I've taken that step back, the pressure that someone who is more quiet and that's who they are, which is wonderful and fine. Like, everyone is different. Like, that to give them that space, and it doesn't mean that they're not having fun because they're being more quiet. And that was something I think for anyone who's extroverted and kind of like pushes that energy onto other people to like bring them out of their comfort zone, sometimes that can be a good thing, but not if you're doing it for your own benefit. And that was like a really selfish behavior, which I thought was coming from a good place, like, but you know, there's a difference. Shout out to Tracy, who always says this, but there's a difference between your, like, intentions are nothing. They don't matter. Because if that's not where the action lands, like, oh, well, you're accountable for that, or you should be anyway. So yeah, that's like another thing that taught me that I didn't really think about until I just heard you say that. But we all deserve to be able to be who we are and be in groups of people who are accepting of that. I think sometimes like my anxious energy makes me like louder than I would be otherwise. So when I'm drinking, that's just like amplified because it's like, So it is interesting to just, I thought I wouldn't have any fun giving up drinking. I thought I was like destined for like a boring year. And I now, like I said last week, I don't even care that I don't drink. Like I'm not missing anything. So, which is a hard concept to comprehend. So I guess that's where it gets tough. If you do have a lot of people in your life who are partying hardcore and you don't have anyone to be around who doesn't do that, then that's where I'm not like 100% sure how to even speak to that, because thankfully that hasn't been my experience. When I've talked about my drinking in therapy, my therapists always think like I hang out with these like raging partiers just because like I've explained just how easy it is to socially drink, which for me always can very easily turn into something really crazy, but it's not even always set out to be that way. It's just that when you've got a bunch of people drinking and time goes by, you just never know what's going to happen. So it's not even like always a party crowd. It's just, that's what the nature of drinking can just lead to, like wild things. But like you said, you are worth finding people who will, love you for who you are without alcohol or without having to put on any kind of facade. Like that's totally appropriate.
I think it just takes time too. Like, 'cause now I'm like totally confident. I'm like, I can go somewhere, and if people look at me weird, if I don't decide to have a drink, I'm like, I don't really care. Like, why are you judging me if I'm like having a drink or not? Like, you know, I think it's just learning about yourself and growing in that like self-confidence. I mean, the message we always preach, like, it's not going to be perfect, but like I've definitely grown in my self-confidence in that. And I can go into a situation, and if I'm like, I don't really want to have a drink tonight, it's like I can still go and be social, or I can say no and not go. And like, there's the freedom to do that. And I think it is a process, because back in college, I think there was I just felt a lot of pressure, and I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. And it takes time, I think. And also for me, I mean, I have like psoriasis, which makes me like an actual health thing where I'm like, if I drink a ton, it affects me like physically. So it's just figuring out what is like important to you, like on the scale, like what, I don't know.
No, you're right. And I think when you just said that people like judge you for not drinking, I feel like that's the ultimate form of projection. And that's kind of what I was saying. Like, if there's the whole thing, like, don't drink alone. and that right there, if there's a behavior that we do that we shouldn't do by ourselves, because that is like potentially, like, I'm not saying if you have a glass of wine by yourself, like, or whatever drink by yourself, it's a problem. But if you're like, typically if you're getting highly intoxicated by yourself, there's an underlying issue going on. Typically, I'm not saying I'm superior because I was doing it in social settings, because I don't think that at all. But like, if I'm drinking 7 drinks and you're not, I want you to drink with me so that I don't have to be alone in whatever happens to me because I'm drinking 7 drinks. Yeah. I think that was probably the other part of like wanting to push drinking on people, was like, don't leave me hanging over here, which is not, that's not nice. That's not about the other person having fun. Like, it may look like that, but like, that's like in those like movies with like teenage girls. Like, there's so many examples of this where it's like they convince the like good innocent person to do something they never wanted to do for fun, and then like, oh, do it with me, like, don't you want to? And it's like very toxic behavior. And that was absolutely like all straight say, like, I definitely encouraged a lot of toxicity with drinking because I was being consumed by it.
Yeah.
And I wanted other people to be with me.
Yeah.
Which is not cool. And, you know, might seem all fun and good in a party situation, but life is a lot more than what happens in an isolated evening of partying. Because that's not really real. Like, it is real, especially if there's consequences, but like, it's not.
Yeah.
So yeah. Who would have thought? What do you want to say about athletic performance and alcohol?
Yeah. I'll keep this pretty brief just because I feel like a majority of this is almost common sense in the fact that like, it's not going to be a surprise for me to sit here and be like, alcohol is going to affect your athletic performance if you're drinking before you go play a sport. Like, if you're an athlete or if you're like have a race the next day, like probably
want to go to the gym or
just work out,
like whatever.
It's not really going to be your best interest. Cause you know, like your ability to play sports or any exercise, you know, like anything that requires, you know, your coordination and like cognitive precision, like is going to be affected negatively by alcohol consumption. Because, you know, alcohol consumption obviously impairs like your reaction time, your balance, your hand-eye coordination, which you need all of those things in order to move your body, whether it's for exercise, whether it's for a game, a race, a workout, whatever it is. And also like alcohol also acts as a diuretic, by speeding up like the loss of fluids and electrolytes that your body needs for activity and proper hydration. So like, I'll refer back to my experience in college. Like, as a college athlete, if we had a game, like we were not allowed to consume alcohol for 48 hours. I want to say 48. I don't think it was 72, but like 48 hours, because like technically, you know, alcohol is still, even if you go out on a Friday night and you wake up Saturday and you've slept it off, like it's still in your body. And so if you are planning workout, activity, game, whatever, like you really can't be consuming alcohol anywhere within like a 24-hour, honestly, time frame, because of all of these negative effects that it has. So in terms of like alcohol's effect on athletic performance, I am going to take kind of like the devil's advocate stance here, because there's really not anything positive in terms of alcohol in correlation to athletic performance. Alcohol can also increase the production of lactic acid in your body, which worsens your muscle fatigue when you exercise. And also it can interfere with your body's ability to grow and maintain muscle, because it affects something called muscle protein synthesis, which is a naturally occurring process in your body where protein is produced to repair muscle damage that happens during intense exercise. You know, I've shared this before, like when you work out, your muscle, you know, you break down those muscle fibers and they have to repair and rebuild, which is how you technically get stronger. That's like hypertrophy training. but that's like imperative for muscle development. And so obviously alcohol consumption is going to impair this process. And so if your main goal with exercising or working out is to build muscle, drinking heavily, binge drinking is going to affect all of this, because it also affects your hormones and can decrease your metabolism. So in terms of like your testosterone and cortisol, it's going to decrease your testosterone and increase cortisol. And so males and females, obviously males have more testosterone, but like we still need that for muscle growth. And then like too much cortisol, which is like the hormone released for like fight or flight, that's going to be released as well, which can negatively impact your body and destroy your muscle. So this kind of some factual stuff to think about. If athletic performance, if movement is super important to you. Not to say you can't have both. Obviously, I'm very much into fitness and moving my body, but I also will enjoy a glass of wine or a drink with girls or my husband. But if we're talking athletic performance, there's really nothing positive to say about the effects that alcohol is going to have on that. Like, that's just facts.
Yeah. And just think about, like, if you've ever been hungover.
Yeah.
You don't want to do anything. And if you,
right.
Which is fine to rest. Rest is great.
Right. Absolutely.
But if you had plans to like do something active because you're training for something, or just like you had a commitment and then you drank more than your body could handle without a hangover, then you can't do your movement, which can just kind of throw things off if that's becoming like a chronic behavior too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So.
Okay. Anything else on your mind?
I don't think so. What about you?
Nope. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening today to the second half of our alcohol episode. If you want to find us online, we post regularly on our shared Instagram page at FitFueledFree. Jenna's personal page is JenFit, and mine is dietitian Dani Cast. And we also have a Gmail account, fitfueledfree@gmail.com. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns for us, we love to hear from you. So thanks so much again, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye, guys.